He expected tears, or anger, or at least a raised voice that would confirm one last time that he still mattered enough to upset her. Instead, she stood there quietly, her bag already over her shoulder, keys resting calmly in her palm as if this were just another errand. No shaking hands. No dramatics ahí. No final accusation rehearsed in the mirror. Just stillness. He watched her carefully, waiting for the moment when the calm would crack. It always did. Every disagreement before this had followed the same rhythm. Her explaining, him dismissing, her trying harder, her voice tightening as she searched for the right words to make him care. But this time she didn't search. She didn't explain. She didn't even look angry. Is that it? He asked, half laughing, half confused. You're just leaving? She nodded once. Not sharply, not bitterly, just a small, controlled movement, as if she had already practiced this decision privately. Yes, that single word unsettled him more than any argument ever had. He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, waiting for the follow-up. The speech, the list, the emotional monologue he'd grown used to tuning out. Nothing came. She glanced around the room, not nostalgically, not sadly, just observant, like someone closing a chapter they'd already finished reading. You're not even going to tell me why? He asked. She paused then, just long enough to make him think he'd finally pushed the right button. Her eyes met his, not pleading, not hopeful. If you love stories like this, where love is honest and endings are earned and beautiful, then hit the subscribe button. Drop your location in the comments section and keep listening because there are many more waiting for you. Tired. I already did, she said softly. Many times. And with that, she reached for the door. That was the moment he should have stopped her. He didn't, because in his mind, silence meant surrender. Because calm felt like permission. Because he mistook her restraint for weakness, just like he always had. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. No Islam. No dramatic exit. No echo of regret. He stood there for a few seconds longer than necessary, listening for footsteps returning, waiting for the familiar pattern. The pause, the doubt, the knock. It never came. At first, he felt relieved. He told himself this was the most mature breakup they'd ever had. Proof that they'd finally outgrown the chaos. She'll cool off, he muttered, reaching for his phone before stopping himself. He didn't want to seem desperate. Not when she was the one walking away. He set the phone down. Hours passed. Then a night. Then a morning. Still nothing. He expected a message, something light, something safe. A question disguised as an excuse. That was how she used to return after disagreements. She always came back gently, as if afraid of disturbing him. But her name never appeared on his screen. By the third day, the relief started to itch. By the fifth, it felt strange. By the seventh, it felt wrong. He replayed the moment in his head. The way she didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't ask him to choose her. The way she walked out like someone who had already accepted the outcome. It bothered him more than he wanted to admit. She had loved him loudly once. Defended him when others questioned his priorities. Adjusted her expectations so his ambitions could breathe. Learned how to ask for less without realizing she was shrinking. And he had mistaken her patience for permanence. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that her silence had started long before that door closed. It began in the moments she paused before speaking. In the nights she rehearsed conversations she never initiated. In the way she smiled through disappointment because she was tired of being too much. By the time she walked away, she had already grieved the relationship alone. That was why there were no tears. That was why there was no drama. She wasn't leaving to punish him. She was leaving because she was done bleeding in private. Meanwhile, he told himself a different story. She'll realize what she's losing. She just needs space. She always comes back. He didn't see the difference between space and distance, between quiet and closure, between a woman who wants to be understood and a woman who has finally understood. Weeks later, when the absence began to feel heavier than any argument they'd ever had, He would remember her face in that moment. Not angry, not broken. Resolved. But by then, it would already be too late. Because the most dangerous thing she ever did wasn't walking away. It was doing it without a fight. And he would spend a long time learning what that really meant. If her name was Elara. And for a long time, Elara believed that love was something you proved by enduring. The man she loved, Nathan, never asked her to change. Not directly. He didn't need to. His silence did the work for him. His distracted nods. His half-listening, "we'll talk later." His way of turning serious conversations into inconveniences. At first, she didn't notice the pattern. Love rarely announces when it's becoming one-sided. It starts small. Elara would bring something up gently, carefully choosing the moment. She'd wait until Nathan seemed relaxed, until his phone was face down, until the day felt calm enough to handle honesty. "I feel like we don't spend much time together anymore," she'd say softly. Not accusing, just honest. Nathan would sigh, not dramatically, just enough to suggest fatigue. "I've just got a lot on my plate right now." And she would nod. Of course he did. So she adjusted. She stopped asking on weekdays. Then she stopped asking at all. She learned how to enjoy her own company while sitting beside him. Learned how to turn loneliness into independence because it sounded healthier that way. When she needed reassurance, she reframed it as support. When she needed presence, she accepted promises. When she needed effort, she told herself patience was love. People praised her for being understanding. Nathan loved that about her. What he didn't notice was how often Elara swallowed words before they reached her mouth. How many conversations she rehearsed internally, only to abandon halfway through because she didn't want to sound needy again. The fights they did have were never explosive. They were quiet. Elara would raise an issue. Nathan would respond logically, efficiently, like someone solving a problem instead of listening to a person. "You're overthinking. It's not that serious. You're making it bigger than it is." And every time he said those things, something inside her shrank just a little. Not because he was cruel, but because he was consistent. The turning point didn't come during a breakup-level argument. It came on an ordinary evening. Elara had had a difficult day. One of those days that left her feeling invisible in rooms she worked hard to belong in. She didn't need fixing. She didn't need advice. She just needed to be heard. She told Nathan about it while they sat on opposite ends of the couch. He nodded, half smiled, checked his phone once, then twice. Then he said, "You'll be fine. You always are." And just like that, the conversation ended. Not with anger, with dismissal. That night, Elara went to bed beside him and stared at the ceiling, realizing something that frightened her more than any argument ever had. She felt alone even though she wasn't. That's when she stopped trying to explain herself. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly. She stopped correcting him when he misunderstood her tone. Stopped reminding him of important dates. Stopped asking if he noticed when she changed her hair, her habits, her energy. She became easier, and Nathan mistook that for peace. What he didn't know was that Elara had started keeping her truth to herself. Not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered too much to keep offering it to someone who kept setting it down. The final conversation, the one he thought caused the breakup, was almost laughably small. A missed commitment. An "I forgot." A casual apology delivered without eye contact. Nathan expected frustration. He expected a list of grievances. He expected Elara to finally erupt. Instead, she listened quietly. And in that quiet, something clicked into place. She saw the pattern clearly for the first time, not emotionally but logically. She realized she had been asking someone to meet her halfway while standing on her side the entire time. That was the moment she decided. Not to leave, but to stop fighting for something that required her silence to survive. From then on, every interaction became confirmation. Nathan noticed she was calmer, less reactive, easier to be around. He didn't notice she had stopped needing him. Elara began doing small things for herself, things she used to postpone for him. She took longer walks, spent evenings reading instead of waiting, reconnected with parts of herself that had gone quiet. And with every reclaimed moment, The idea of leaving stopped feeling terrifying. It started feeling necessary. By the time she packed her bag that final day, she wasn't angry. She was clear. That was why there was no drama. Because drama comes from hope. And hope had already done its work and left. She didn't walk away because she stopped loving Nathan. She walked away because she finally started loving herself in a way that no longer required permission. And Nathan never noticed the moment she stopped fighting. Because it didn't disrupt his life. It only changed hers. For the first few weeks after Elara left, Nathan felt fine. Not relieved exactly, just uninterrupted. No late-night conversations that drifted into emotions he didn't know how to respond to. No pauses in his routine. No expectations waiting for him at the end of a long day. He told himself this was what peace felt like. When friends asked how he was holding up, he shrugged casually. "We ended things calmly," he said. "No drama." He said it like a win. And maybe that's what made it easier to miss the details. Elara didn't block him. She didn't unfollow him. She didn't erase herself from his world the way people usually do when they want to be noticed. Instead, she went quiet. No indirect posts.
No sat quotes.
No visible signs of healing or heartbreak. Nathan checked her profile once, then twice, more out of curiosity than concern. Everything looked the same. Same photos. Same smile frozen in time. She wasn't performing pain. And that unsettled him more than he expected. Still, he convinced himself it meant nothing. She's just processing, he thought. She always needs time. Weeks passed. Then a month. And something subtle began to shift. It wasn't loneliness. It wasn't regret. It was inconvenience. Nathan reached for his phone during moments when he used to text Elara without thinking. To share an observation, complaint, a small victory that didn't matter to anyone else. Each time his thumb hovered, then stopped. There was no place to send those thoughts anymore. At work, things were going well. His calendar was full. His life looked productive, impressive even. From the outside, nothing had been lost. But at night, the silence felt different than he remembered. Not empty, unanswered. One evening, while scrolling absent-mindedly, he noticed something odd. Elara had been tagged in a photo. Not a dramatic one. Not a celebration. Just a quiet group picture from a small event. People standing casually, unposed, unaware of the camera. She was there, laughing. Not the careful smile she used to wear around him. This one reached her eyes. Nathan stared longer than he meant to. It bothered him. Not because she looked happy, but because she looked unchanged by the loss of him.
No visible aftermath.
No recovery arc. Just continuity. He told himself not to overthink it. But overthinking had already started. Over the next few weeks, he noticed more things. Mutual friends mentioned her in passing. Nothing emotional, nothing pointed. Elara's been busy lately. She's picked up some new projects. She seems really grounded these days. Grounded. The word followed him longer than it should have. Nathan began replaying memories, searching for something he might have missed. A sign. A warning. A moment when she stopped leaning toward him. But every memory blurred into the same image. Elara being patient. Elara waiting. Elara adjusting. It dawned on him slowly that her calm exit hadn't been strength in the moment. It had been preparation. Then came the twist, the one he never anticipated. He ran into her by accident. Not in a dramatic setting. Not somewhere meaningful. Just a random afternoon. Crossing paths at a cafe he barely remembered recommending to her once. She didn't see him at first. Nathan noticed how effortlessly she moved through the space. Ordering confidently, exchanging small talk, entirely present in herself. When she finally turned and saw him, she didn't freeze. She smiled. Not warmly, not coldly, politely, like someone greeting a former chapter, not a current wound. "Hi, Nathan," she said. Hearing his name in her voice again stirred something sharp and unexpected. They exchanged a few words, safe ones, neutral ones. "How have you been?" "Good." "You?" "Busy." Then she said something that landed harder than any accusation ever could. "I was meaning to thank you, actually." He blinked. For what? For teaching me the difference between being loved and being tolerated. She said it gently.
No bitterness.
No edge. Then she added, I didn't realize how quiet I'd become until I stopped needing you to hear me. Nathan felt something slip out of place inside him. This wasn't the conversation he'd imagined. There was no plea, no reopening of wounds, no invitation to revisit the past. She wasn't healed because she'd replaced him. She was healed because she'd reclaimed herself. And the most unsettling part? She wasn't trying to prove anything. As they parted, she didn't linger, didn't look back, didn't leave him with a dramatic final line. She simply walked away again, this time without even the weight of history slowing her down. That night, Nathan finally understood something he'd been avoiding. Elara hadn't gone silent to make him miss her. She had gone silent because she no longer needed to be heard by him. Her absence wasn't punishment. It was completion. And the comfort he'd enjoyed in her quietness? It had only delayed the realization that her calm was never temporary. It was permanent. For the first time since she left, the silence didn't feel peaceful. Felt final. Nathan didn't reach out immediately. Not after the cafe. Not after the sleepless night that followed. He told himself he needed time. To think, to understand what he'd felt when Elara looked at him like someone she once knew. Not someone she still needed. But time didn't bring clarity. It brought urgency. Because once he realized she was gone in a way that didn't include drama or bitterness, the idea of never being able to speak to her again became unbearable. So he sent a message. It was careful, polished, respectful. Hey, I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking a lot since we ran into each other. Would you be open to meeting? No pressure. He stared at the screen longer than he wanted to admit. The reply didn't come quickly. When it finally did, it wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. I can meet, but only if we're clear about what this is. That sentence alone unsettled him. They chose a public place, quiet, neutral, intentional. Not a restaurant tied to memories. Not somewhere private. Somewhere that suggested boundaries without announcing them. Elara arrived on time. Nathan noticed everything immediately. The steadiness in her posture, the unhurried way she settled into her seat, the absence of nervous habits she used to have around him. She wasn't bracing herself. She wasn't hoping. She was present. Before he could begin, she spoke. I want to be clear, Elara said calmly. This isn't a second chance conversation. Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it again. She continued, unflinching. I'm here because I believe in honesty, not because I'm undecided. That was condition 1.
No ambiguity. No emotional bargaining.
Nathan nodded slowly. I understand. He didn't, but he wanted to. They talked. Carefully. Thoughtfully. Nathan apologized, not vaguely, not defensively. He named things.
Moments.
Patterns. He admitted what he hadn't seen while it was happening. Elara listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't soften. When he finished, she waited a beat longer than necessary before responding. I appreciate the accountability, she said. But acknowledgement isn't the same as change. That was condition 2. Words weren't currency anymore. Then came the hardest part. If we continue talking, she said, it won't be daily. It won't be emotional processing. And it won't be about fixing the past. Nathan frowned slightly. Then what would it be? She met his eyes. Observation. He felt exposed by that word. You don't get access to my inner world right now, Elara continued. Not because I'm punishing you, but because I protect it. That was condition 3. Limited access. Earned presence. He realized then that this wasn't a reunion in the way he'd imagined. This was an evaluation. They agreed to meet again weeks later, not days. No late-night texts. No sudden calls. No expectations of reassurance. Nathan left that meeting feeling unsettled in a way he couldn't explain. He hadn't won anything. He'd been allowed proximity. Over the next few weeks, he noticed how different everything felt. When they met, Elara didn't overextend. If she disagreed, she said so once. If something didn't work for her, she didn't negotiate with herself before speaking. When Nathan slipped into old habits, minimizing, rationalizing, she didn't argue. She disengaged. That was condition 4.
No emotion el labor. No convincing.
No explaining what she'd already explained before. One afternoon, after he arrived late without warning, she stood to leave without comment. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't think." "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm going." The calmness of it struck him harder than anger ever could have. Later, during one of their conversations, Nathan asked the question he'd been holding back. "Is there a chance?" he said carefully. "For us?" Elara didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was steady. "There's a possibility," she said, "but not a promise." That was condition 5. No relationship, she added, can exist where one person disappears to keep the peace. Nathan swallowed. This version of Elara didn't bend herself around him. She didn't anticipate his needs. She didn't soften truths to protect his comfort. And for the first time, Nathan understood something crucial. Reunion didn't mean restoration. It meant renegotiation on her terms. He was no longer the center. He was a participant. And participation required effort he couldn't outsource or postpone. As weeks turned into months, Nathan felt the weight of consistency. No grand gestures impressed her. Only alignment. Only follow-through. Only presence when it was inconvenient. And even then, Elara never leaned back into him the way she once had. She stayed rooted in herself. One evening, as they parted after another measured conversation, Nathan realized the truth he'd been avoiding. This wasn't about getting her back. This was about proving to her and to himself that he could meet her where she stood now. And the most terrifying part? She didn't need him to succeed. She had already built a life that worked without him. Which meant the reunion wasn't his redemption. It was his test. Nathan thought the test would end with a verdict. Yes or no. Stay or leave. Together or done. What he didn't expect was that there would be no announcement at all. Weeks turned into months. Their meetings stayed measured, intentional, rare. Elara never rushed them closer, never pushed them apart. She allowed the space to speak for itself. Nathan learned to live inside that space. He stopped performing change and started practicing it. Quietly, consistently. Not because she demanded it, but because anything less felt dishonest now. He showed up when he said he would. Listened without interrupting. Accepted no without asking for reasons. Still, Elara didn't move closer. And that unsettled him more than rejection ever could have. One evening, after a long walk that ended without conclusions or confessions, Nathan finally asked the question that had been circling his mind. "Are you ever going to let me back in?" he asked, not pleading, just honest. Elara stopped walking. She looked at him for a long moment, not searching his face, but checking her own feelings. "I already did," she said. "Just not the way you expected." He frowned. "I don't understand." She smiled softly, not apologetically. "That's the twist," she said. "You thought getting me back meant restoring what we had. I don't want that." The words landed gently, but firmly. "I like who you're becoming," Elara continued. "But I love who I already am. And I won't build my happiness around the hope that someone stays this time." Nathan felt something loosen inside him. Not fear. Relief. "So, what does that mean for us?" he asked. "It means," she said, "that if we choose each other, it's because our lives fit. Not because one of us adjusted to survive the other." He nodded slowly. That night, they didn't decide anything. And that was the decision. Life unfolded not dramatically, not publicly. They didn't rush into labels. Didn't announce reunions. Didn't rewrite the past. They built something adjacent to it. Elara kept her independence fiercely. Her routines stayed hers. Her joy wasn't negotiated. Nathan learned how to exist beside her without leaning on her to steady him. And then came the moment that changed everything. Not a proposal. Not a declaration. A choice. Elara was offered an opportunity. One she would have once declined without discussion. A chance to expand her work, her world, her sense of self. It meant distance, time, uncertainty. Nathan listened as she explained it. When she finished, he asked only one question. What do you want? She answered without hesitation. I want to go. He nodded. Then you should. No fear disguised as love. That was the moment Elara realized something important. She no longer had to choose between herself and connection. And that was the happiest twist of all. They didn't end. But they didn't cling either. They chose each other freely or not at all. Time passed. Elara thrived, expanded, lived fully. Nathan didn't wait for her return to feel whole. He continued building a life that didn't depend on being chosen to have value. When they came back together again, months later, it felt different. Lighter, equal. They met not as people trying to fix what broke, but as two individuals who had learned how to stand without leaning. Nathan finally understood the truth Elara had been living all along. Her walking away wasn't revenge. It was calibration. He didn't just learn. Love taught him another dimension to not throw someone's presence away. She created a version of happiness that didn't need drama, validation, or sacrifice to survive.